So specific plan options. We developed 4 different options. To get there, we started by really looking at the potential typologies of buildings that could accommodate these 132 units. And so we looked at a walk-up typology, and by typology, I mean kind of a type of construction. And so a walk-up is, 3 to 4 stories. Much of the parking is tucked under into garages, more individual garages into the building, and then the unit sits, some maybe on that same level as the garage and some above. So, it could be uh, uh, flats that have that tuck under garage. A wrap is a typology where you would have a parking structure that is wrapped by units, and then that could be up to 5 stories or so. And then a podium is where the parking happens below. So often in a garage, a shared garage that exists below the building, and then you'd have 4 to 5 stories above that. And so we played with, where these buildings could go on the site, and we basically discovered that the walk-up just needed too much room. It's lower, which could be nice, but that means that you needed more site area to put those units, and so that became really challenging. Just while it's an economical building typology, the footprint was just really too large. The wrap does get a lot of efficiency, but in a constrained site like this, it's actually kind of a bulky typology because you are relying on the footprint of a parking structure, and it actually provides more parking than we really need. And so it became inefficient to both have the parking structure and the building kind of apartments that are wrapping it. And so finally, we kind of ended on this podium typology, and so that's the typology that you'll be seeing explored in the 4 options. It's more compact, efficiently uses the site, and still gets the parking counts that we need for this housing. So option 1. And what we'll be showing here is largely kind of talking about locations. We will be showing some massing, but what we're really trying to understand is location. And so if you take the survey that is going to be paired with this, you will see that questions have to do with where on the site different things should occur, and that's kind of some of the early decisions that we need to make. So this looks at putting the housing, majority of the housing, 130 dwelling units in kind of the Blair Park open space site. You'll see that there are 2 units that are marked there, one coming off of Maxwellton and one would be accessed off of Abbott. So off of Maxwellton, off of Abbott, and those are consistent through each of the options. These units could be folded into this other project fairly easily. It's just 2 units, but we do see some value in these sites, and so we wanted to explore that, and we're interested in getting your feedback on whether that's a good idea or not. This option also generally leaves the corporation yard and the recreation site, Coaches Field, intact, as well as the skate park. There could be some improvements like enlarging Coaches Field to be a true U14 soccer field, potentially adding some parking, but generally keeps these uses intact and in the same place. This is an illustrative plan that illustrates that, so you can see the sports field, Coaches Field here, the public works yard, and then the housing in the Blair Park open space. Each of the projects also has a trail that winds up the hillside to capture some of those amazing views. And that trail would connect all the way up to Maxwellton. This is a perspectival view of that concept. And so what this represents is about 4 floors of housing over podium parking. So you can see, as the Blair Park slopes down, a little bit more of that building gets exposed in that downslope. Buildings are kind of tucked in there against the hillside as much as possible. A second option is to put all the housing on the coaches field side of the site. So north of Moraga Avenue. The projects are paired, but kind of surround a open space. So they group together. That kind of allows one of the projects to the market rate project to kind of go up the hill a little bit, benefit from some of the views, and largely keeps the corporation yard intact. It would lose some of kind of the landscape storage space, but maybe we'd find some area, say, down towards this expanded parking to accommodate some of those uses. This would entail moving the soccer field over to the Blair Park open space side. And that's been studied before. It's something that certainly could be done. Some grading work would be needed, and additional parking would be needed to be provided on that side of the site. Uh, and so this is an illustration of what that could look like. You can see that coach's field has moved over to the Blair Park open space. You get a trail that leads up to it, connecting back into the existing side of the site where the soccer field is, the public works yard. Additional parking provided near the soccer field, a little skate spot. And then new housing exists kind of on where Coaches Field currently is. So an easy site to develop, appropriate for the affordable housing development. And then a project that might go up the hillside a bit. You can see this road winding up to connect to it, entering into that podium parking. And these buildings would have greater access to some of the longer views out to the bay. And again, a 3D representation of that concept. The third option, again, looks at putting all the housing on the coaches field side of the site, but actually leaves the soccer field in place. It does end up moving then the corp yard to the Blair Park open space side. And so this would be a new corporation yard. It would be able to connect to some remaining open space as part of the Blair Park side, and potentially kind of blend in, using kind of the landscape storage area to maybe nursery site to be part of that park site. Um, on the coaches field side, the soccer field would be expanded to be a U14 soccer field, and then all of the housing would tuck up against the hillside. And so the market rate project could still be in the area out kind of where some of the views are, and then the affordable site would be in the back here. And so that should have another 60 DU marked there in this graphic. And you can see that project here. So the market rate, affordable, kind of all is one project here, accessed off of kind of basically where the current entry to the soccer field and the public works yard are. New public works yard moves to the south side of Moraga Avenue. And a representation. So these two units are similar to what we saw in the last concept, but then the project continues kind of in line, tucked against that hillside, allowing for the soccer field to remain and be improved. Finally, the last option is similar to the option that I just presented, but instead of moving the corporation yard to the Blair Park open space side, it actually says that you could put the soccer field and potentially baseball, softball field on top of a parking structure. And the parking that is needed for the field and rec needs does not completely fill this parking structure, maybe just about half of it. And so you could devote the other half to public works functions. You could actually put offices in that covered space. It could have parking areas. We would probably need some areas still outside of the structure for, say, landscape storage and other public works functions that could potentially happen adjacent on this same site. But it would allow for kind of an improved public works facility, parking, and a new sports field. So this would be kind of a large new civic structure that would accommodate these uses, thereby allowing Blair Park open space to remain free and then the housing is similarly tucked up against the hillside, similar to the previous scheme. And so again, a view of what that could look like. And plan, and you can see, maybe a improved or better programmed Blair Park open space, the soccer field over the parking structure, improved parking, and housing up along the hillside. And a three-dimensional view of what that looks like. You can see that the gray here is representing that parking structure that lifts the field up. As part of these concepts, we are working with a civil engineer on infrastructure. And so we wanted to understand kind of what is the impact of each of these concepts, each of these options. And this is not necessarily cost. This is really about kind of level of impact. So for example, um, the first category you can see here is demolition. On option one, we're really not moving much. So the impact is very low, one being low. And so that there's that green one there. Whereas some of the other options, we're actually moving more things and needing to demolish things to build new things. And so there's a cost, of course, if you're moving something, if you need to demolish something and rebuild it. And so we want to understand kind of that level of impact. Similarly, for earthwork retaining, structural complexity, road work, stormwater, water, dry utilities, sewer, and then impacts to the open spaces, we want to understand how each option is just kind of being graded in level of impact. And so this is kind of more of a environmental or sustainability metric. There's, of course, a cost, something that has more impact is going to tend to have more cost, but there could be some big ticket items in here. Like option 4 has that parking structure, even though it has a very low impact, actually because of the efficiency of that parking structure is going in itself is going to have a high cost. That's somewhat represented in the structural complexity of it, but it's not equally necessarily. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this one is cheaper, just that it has less impact to the site. We also are looking at kind of two economic studies, feasibility and fiscal studies. And so I want to kind of cover this a little bit. Feasibility studies is looking at the project and saying, with the current market infrastructure and development costs, does this project pencil? Is it going to be attractive to real estate developers? The fiscal study is looking at kind of the longer term. Once it's built, once it's feasible, how is this going to impact the city? How is it going to impact the city's general fund? What are the costs going to be to the city for this project to exist? Our economic consultant is kind of approaching each of these a little differently. For the feasibility study, the common technique is to look at a residual land value. And so this basically says that after you build the project, what's the building's value? You subtract the costs to build it, to develop it, and then you're left with a number that is called the residual land value. And this tells a developer, whether this is a profitable project, right? You want that residual land value to be a positive number. For the fiscal study, our consultant is looking at the existing city documents, budgets. They're estimating revenues, estimating then expenditures based on this project, and looking at how that relates to the city's budget. Some takeaways from feasibility. In terms of value creation, each of these concepts has similar value. There is some difference in, say, like views. Views may create a premium for one alternative versus another, but those are going to be a smaller percentage. And another factor could be whether it's a rental project versus ownership. In terms of development costs, those have more variability across the alternatives. The The vertical costs may be similar because we're dealing with a similar construction type. We looked at all of these as a podium type of construction, so that creates similar vertical costs. But the horizontal costs could be very different. So it's, the prepping the site, moving dirt, the infrastructure to actually get the project built could be different. So that with that residual land value, that analysis is in progress, and we're working with that consultant to kind of attach actual numbers to this study. For the fiscal analysis, on the revenue side, they don't vary significantly across the alternatives. Again, it's kind of a similar project. It's a similar mix in number of units. So that key value is going to be that property tax on the market rate housing. The affordable housing is going to probably have a tax exemption. On the expenditures, that also does not vary too much across the alternatives because, again, it's basically the same project. And so the city services needed, once it's built, the city services needed to support it are basically going to be the same. Overall, kind of what, initially they've been finding is that in this project, it would be generally neutral, if not even slightly positive, to the city's budget. And so that's a good sign. So kind of next steps on feasibility analysis, we'll be refining that program and assumptions across the alternatives. We'll be completing that residual land value analysis, and then looking at, are there ways to improve that through mechanisms to defray infrastructure costs or other ways to improve project feasibility so that it's both, more attractive for a developer, but then also, are there more community benefits that can be created through the project. So with that, I will close. We had a great open house, and I encourage you to talk to other community members who may have attended to learn more. There will be a survey online paired with this presentation, and encourage you to take that survey and give us your feedback on the different options. I'll just end by reminding you of the project process. Again, we're just past this community workshop. We'll be taking feedback from the workshop and this survey and revising our alternatives to present to Planning Commission, City Council before we develop the preferred alternative into the specific plan. So thank you. Appreciate you listening to this and look forward to getting your feedback.